Have you ever just had that unsettling feeling that the world around you shifted? Maybe you saw a car vanish into thin air, or a bird frozen in the sky like a paused video game. Today we aren't talking about creepypastas or internet myths. We're diving into the 10 documented, factual, and terrifying real glitches that suggest our reality might be overlapping with something else entirely. From 2026 space discoveries to baffling footage that defies the laws of physics, these are the moments where the simulation cracked. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you might just start questioning if the room you're sitting in is the same one you woke up in. Imagine driving down a busy street, watching a car swerve toward a curb, only for it to delete itself from existence before it even hits the sidewalk. In late 2024, a witness in Bakersfield, California, reported a black SUV with tinted windows driving erratically near Challenger Park. As the vehicle appeared to lose control and head straight for the curb, it didn't crash. It didn't turn. According to multiple witness statements, it simply blinked out of reality. This wasn't just one person's imagination. Local forums saw a surge of reports of ghost vehicles appearing and disappearing in this specific corridor. The footage captured by a nearby dash cam shows the vehicle's brake lights illuminating right before the pixels seemingly dissolve into the background. Some observers noted that the car left no tire marks on the pavement despite its high speed, and the audio from the dash cam recorded a high-pitched hum right at the moment of disappearance. Physicists speculate that these could be localized transparency events where two parallel timelines briefly intersect at a high-energy junction. Gravity is one of the most fundamental laws of our universe, but apparently somehow forgot to tell the birds. In early 2025, several high-definition videos went viral showing birds, specifically hawks and pigeons, completely motionless in mid-air. These aren't just birds gliding on a thermal drift. Their wings are not flapping, their bodies aren't vibrating, and they remain fixed at a specific coordinate in the sky like a 3D model stuck in a loading screen. While skeptics point to wind resistance, aeronautical experts have struggled to explain how a bird can remain perfectly still for over 45 seconds without any visible wing adjustment or tail flickering. In one specific video from Malaysia, a witness even touched a frozen bird with a pole and it floated away like a weightless object rather than flying. The most baffling part? Once the glitch ends, the bird usually just resumes its flight instantly as if it never stopped. What if I told you there's a massive structure right next to us that we literally cannot see, proving that a ghost world exists in the same space as ours? Just this year, in February 2026, astronomers using the Hubble telescope and the Euclid Observatory identified a nearly invisible galaxy dubbed Candidate Dark Galaxy 2, or CDG2. Located in the Perseus cluster, this galaxy is composed of roughly 99% dark matter. It holds 4 globular star clusters together with massive gravitational force, yet it emits almost no light and contains very few stars. Lead researcher David Lee noted that this is the first galaxy detected solely through its globular cluster population. This discovery provides the strongest evidence yet for the shadow universe theory, the idea that parallel dimensions made of dark matter exist right on top of our own, interacting only through gravity. It suggests that there could be an entire dark world coexisting in the same physical space that we occupy, completely invisible to our senses. Scientists have finally done it. They've caught reality choosing which path to take, and the results are terrifying for anyone who thinks our world is solid. In November 2025, a massive breakthrough in quantum labs confirmed that the wave function, the mathematical probability of all possible outcomes, is a physical reality. Through advanced experiments, physicists observed matter behaving as a field of possibilities before collapsing into a single state upon observation. Even more mind-blowing, researchers documented negative time in atom-photon interactions, where a particle appeared to exit a medium before it even entered it. This proves that every choice you didn't make actually exists in a parallel state until the universe renders a decision. We are essentially living in one branch of an infinite tree, and these experiments show the bridge between those branches is very real. It implies that glitches might just be moments where the rendering process has lagged, showing us a glimpse of the uncollapsed wave function. Imagine waking up in your own bed, but your sheets are a color that you've never owned, and your partner of 4 years has been replaced by an ex that you haven't seen in months. Lorena Garcia Gordo is a woman from Spain who in 2008 posted a plea for help on an online forum. She claimed that she had slipped into a parallel life overnight, and after waking up she found her job was in a different department that she'd never worked in, and her boyfriend had completely vanished. Most chillingly, she hired a private investigator to find him, only to be be told that he never existed in that city. She even checked her sister's medical records and found a surgery that she vividly remembered never happened in this timeline. Lorena sought medical help immediately, passing every psychiatric and drug test with flying colors. She wasn't having a breakdown, she was simply living a life that wasn't hers. Her story is one of the most detailed accounts of a dimensional jump where the differences were subtle but undeniable. You're walking through a crowded airport minding your own business when you look up and see yourself walking toward your gate in the exact same outfit. In early 2025, travelers began reporting an influx of duplicate people at major international airports. One traveler named Tay went viral after capturing a woman with identical jet black hair, a light blue shirt, and bright pants walking past her suitcase. The camera then pans to the creator, who was wearing the exact same outfit, down to the specific style and color with identical hair. While coincidences happen, viewers pointed out the uncanny synchronization of their movements. This event triggered hundreds of comments from others who witnessed duplicate people in the same travel hubs on the same day. Experts in simulation theory suggest that high traffic areas might be prone to rendering the same character model twice to save on processing power, leading to these bizarre visual glitches.
It revolves around a movie that doesn't actually exist, but has a bizarre legend attached to it. So there's this film that supposedly starred the actor Sinbad. If you're like me, you know him from the Arnold Schwarzenegger classic Jingle All the Way, but some also remember Sinbad having been in this movie called Shazam in the 90s, where he played a genie. The premise is that he granted wishes and caused chaos in typical 90s kids movie fashion. A lot of people swear they saw this movie, renting it or watching reruns of it on TV. The only problem is no one can find it now. For years, people have tried to track down any trace of this Shazam movie, but it doesn't seem to exist anywhere in any record. Sinbad himself has even come out and said, like, yeah, I never made that movie. And yet, a surprising number of people are adamant that they remember it. It's become one of the more popular Mandela effects, where a large number of people remember something one way, which turns out to be different, or in this case, not even existing at all. So, what's going on here? Well, one theory is that people are confusing it with another movie called Kazam, starring Shaquille O'Neal as the genie, which was released in 1996. And yeah, I can see people getting confused about the name, but I mean, are all of these people really confusing Sinbad with Shaq? That doesn't really add up. I mean, it's possible, but what if there's a parallel universe where things are just slightly different, and in that universe, there really is a movie called Shazam starring Sinbad, and this very second, there's another version of me filming a video being like, damn, I could have sworn there was a movie called Kazam back in the 90s starring Shaq, but nobody can find it. Next up is Bermeja, a whole island that completely vanished. This one's wild because it really was a real place, a tiny island in the Gulf of Mexico near the Yucatan Peninsula. You could find it on old maps, and even the Mexican government used to claim that it existed. In fact, it was officially documented as part of Mexico's territory, right in the area where they had a territorial dispute with the US over oil rights. Well, in 1997, a Mexican Navy survey came out saying the island was no longer there. They couldn't find it with any of their modern equipment, even though it was supposed to be there, of course. Having been marked on maps for hundreds of years, the island seemed to have just disappeared though. Well, your first thought is that it probably just sank into the ocean, but that's highly unlikely because the area was relatively shallow and there's actually no sign of the island ever having existed in the first place. So what are some other possibilities? Well, some people think it was deliberately erased from maps as part of some secret government deal. Others say cartographers had been wrong the entire time, and that the island was either never there or is a misidentified rock or sandbar that got labeled as an island. But there's a more fringe idea too, one that ties into the title of this video, of course. The idea that Bermeja never existed in the first place, and what we're actually dealing with is a glitch or shift between parallel universes. Some say it's like the island slipped through the cracks of time and was never meant to be in our reality at all. Now let's talk about Flight 19, one of the most famous disappearances in aviation history, and of course, it's tied to the Bermuda Triangle. This incident goes back to December 5th of 1945. Flight 19 was a training mission for 5 US Navy bombers flying out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Everything was going well until something went horribly wrong. The pilots lost their bearings, and they got disoriented. According to reports, they were never able to get a proper fix on their location, and things quickly went from bad to worse. One of the pilots even reported that the compass wasn't working right, but the entire squadron of 5 planes just vanished, like they were swallowed up by the ocean. No wreckage was ever found, and the Navy couldn't figure out exactly what happened. And on top of that, a rescue plane was sent out to search for them, and that plane also went missing. No trace of it was ever found either. The story just adds more mystery when consider how much equipment was searching and still nothing showed up. People started speculating, of course. Some think it was probably a simple navigation error or mechanical failure, nothing too crazy, but others believe that the Bermuda Triangle was involved, that maybe this mysterious region of the ocean is some sort of portal or electromagnetic anomaly that messes with navigation systems, sucking planes and ships into some other dimension or an alternate reality. Others go even further, saying that UFOs or time warps are to blame, but at the end of the day, no one knows what really happened to Flight 19, which is exactly why it's still talked about to this day.
A man arrives at an airport with a legal passport from a country that has existed for 1,000 years, except that country isn't on any map in our world. The story of the man from Taured is often treated as a myth, but it is rooted in the real-life case of John Allen Kutcher Zegras. In 1960, Zegras was detained by Japanese customs carrying a highly sophisticated passport from the independent sovereign state of Taured. His passport was filled with real customs stamps from Europe and Asian countries, yet the Japanese authorities could find no record of such a nation. Zegras spoke several languages and insisted that his country was located in Africa, even pointing to a region on a map where a different country stood in our timeline. After a lengthy trial where he attempted to take his own life in the courtroom, he was eventually deported. The mystery remains: how did a man travel the globe on documents from a country that simply does not exist in our history books? A 400-ton Boeing plane cannot just stop in the sky, yet thousands of passengers and witnesses on the ground have filmed exactly that. Throughout 2024 and 2025, a surge of hovering plane videos has hit social media. In one viral clip from San Francisco, a passenger jet appears perfectly stationary over the water while the camera moves past it. While skeptics cite the parallax effect, which many of these videos are taken from stationary observers on the ground with clear reference points like buildings or trees. Pilots have noted that while a strong headwind can slow a small plane to a crawl, it is physically impossible for a massive commercial airliner to maintain altitude without forward velocity. A plane that heavy would stall and then fall. These glitches suggest that occasionally the physics engine of our world fails to update the position of objects correctly, leaving them suspended in a state of aerodynamic limbo. What if a patient was admitted to a hospital, treated by staff, and then simply deleted from the system as if they never walked through the doors? In late 2024, a bizarre incident was captured on security footage at a hospital in San Pedro. The video shows a security guard greeting an elderly woman who walks through the front doors. He talks to her, checks her in, and even helps her into a wheelchair. However, when the guard looks at the security monitor later, he is stunned. The woman is completely invisible on the camera feed. He is seen talking to thin air and pushing an empty wheelchair. Hospital records showed no check-in for that time. And while skeptics claim that it was a prank, the guard's genuine confusion and the fact that he was reprimanded for hallucinating point to a different reality. This suggests a phasing event where a person from a parallel timeline briefly appeared to the guard but remained invisible to the digital sensors of our world. Two children appear in a village with bright green skin, wearing clothes made of unknown materials and speaking a language that doesn't exist on Earth. This historically documented event from 12th century England was recorded by chroniclers William of Newburgh and Ralph of Colgeshall. The children were discovered in wolf pits and refused all food except raw broad beans. As they eventually learned English, the girl claimed that they came from St. Martin's Land, a world where the sun never rose and everything was green. They described their home as being separated from a bright land by a wide river. While modern theories suggest chlorosis from malnutrition or that they were Flemish immigrants, these don't explain the unknown materials of their clothing or their specific description of a twilight world with different celestial laws. Many researchers today view them as dimensional castaways who wandered through a portal or a thin spot in the fabric between their world and ours. Whether it's a car vanishing in California or a dark matter galaxy being found by Hubble, the evidence is is mounting. Our reality isn't as solid as we think. Are these just coincidences, or are we witnessing the gears of a multiverse grinding against each other?
The USS Cyclops was this massive American naval vessel that disappeared without a trace in 1918. It was carrying over 300 crew members and a hefty load of manganese ore from the Caribbean to Baltimore, and it vanished somewhere again in the Bermuda Triangle. It's one of the most baffling disappearances in naval history, and what makes it so mysterious is that this wasn't just a random ship lost at sea. It was a huge ship with a solid reputation. It was part of the US Navy during World War II. The Cyclops had been a workhorse for the Navy for years, but when it set out from Barbados in March of 1918, something obviously went wrong. It didn't check in when it was supposed to, and no one heard from it again. The ship was huge, 541 feet long, and it was designed to withstand the rough seas, so it's hard to believe it could just sink without a trace. No wreckage was ever found. Some think a freak storm or a mechanical failure could have caused it to sink. Others believe the ship was sabotaged, maybe by enemies during the war, but because the thing disappeared somewhere in the Bermuda Triangle, some people of course think something stranger may have happened. In 1587, a group of English settlers landed on Roanoke Island, which is off the coast of modern-day North Carolina. They were sent to establish a permanent colony, but when a supply ship returned in 1590, they were gone, completely vanished. The settlement was empty, not a single person was left behind. There wasn't even any sign of a struggle. It was as if the whole colony had never even been there in the first place. But they had been. There was a clue that remained. The only sign of them was Croatoan, carved into a tree, the word. Now, the thing is, Croatoan was the name of a nearby island and also the name of a Native American tribe in the area. So, some believe the settlers may have tried to integrate with the tribe, but why would they leave behind such a cryptic message? Could they have been forced to leave by some hostile force, or did they just abandon the colony altogether? Maybe they just moved further inland, but then why did they leave no trace of where they went? Of course, there's also the theory that something much stranger happened. Some people wonder the settlers didn't vanish into the woods or the sea at all, but rather slipped into some other dimension, like a glitch in the fabric of time or space. Could Roanoke have been one of those spots in history where a tear in reality caused an entire settlement to disappear? Now, I will admit that this one may be a bit of a stretch, but I do think it's kind of fascinating, so I feel like it's worth adding here. You might not even know this, but at one point in US history there were $1,000 bills. The US Treasury printed $1,000 notes. These bills were mainly used for huge bank transfers and business deals, not something people would really carry around in their wallet. They were officially discontinued in 1969, along with other high-value bills like $500 and even $5,000 notes. But a lot of these old bills have just disappeared. The US Treasury estimates that millions of dollars worth of these $1,000 bills are still out there somewhere, but where? I mean, are they all hidden away in private collections? Maybe, but there are some conspiracy theories here too. Some believe that certain bills were deliberately destroyed or hidden by the government to keep the true extent of the nation's wealth under wraps. Others think that the bills might still be circulating under the radar in the hands of shadowy people in underground deals. Next is a very strange phenomenon called the Taos hum, a low-frequency sound that can only be heard by a small percentage of people. But for those who do hear it, it's maddening. This hum is mostly heard around Taos, New Mexico, but there have been reports from all over the world of similar sounds in other locations like parts of England, Canada, and Japan. The hum is described as this low rumbling sound, like a distant diesel engine running constantly. But when investigators try to find the source, well, they can't. It's not coming from machinery or anything else that can be easily identified. People who hear it often report feeling headaches and insomnia though. Scientists have thrown out theories like tinnitus, which is an ear condition that can cause ringing in the ears, but this isn't really a ringing sound. Some wonder if the hum could be related to electromagnetic fields in the area or seismic activity in the Earth's crust, but some people believe the Taos hum may be stranger, caused by interdimensional energy shifting through our world because of some tear in the fabric of reality, a hint of a parallel universe bleeding through. In 1966, two Brazilian men, Manuel Pereira de Cruz and Miguel Jose Viana, were found dead on a hilltop wearing lead masks, the kind used to shield from radiation. A cop found their bodies after they'd gone missing. The men were lying side by side, there were no signs of a struggle, and there was a small bottle of water next to them. But the masks, nobody could figure out what those were about. They were also carrying a note that looked like instructions for some sort of ritual, mentioning radiation and how to use the masks. The whole thing made it seem like they were about to do some sort of experiment, but no one could figure out what. Were they part of some secret cult? Were they trying to contact aliens? Or were they mixed up in some government experiment? Nobody knows, and no one ever found out how they died.
One of the most famous experiments in physics revealed something deeply disturbing. When particles like electrons are fired through two slits, they behave like waves, creating an interference pattern. But the moment you try to observe which slit they go through, they stop acting like waves and behave like solid particles instead. It's as if the act of observation itself changes reality. Some scientists have suggested this could mean reality doesn't fully exist until it's being observed, almost like a rendered environment in a simulation that only loads when you're looking at it. The laws of physics appear to be perfectly calibrated to allow life to exist. If fundamental constants like gravity, the strength of the electromagnetic force, or even the ratio of protons to electrons were even slightly different, the universe as we know it wouldn't exist. Stars wouldn't form, atoms wouldn't hold together, and life would be impossible. This level of precision has led some scientists to question whether this is just a coincidence or if the universe was intentionally designed or programmed to function this way. Because when researchers calculate how unlikely these exact conditions are, the odds become so extreme that many argue it doesn't look random at all, it looks set. In the 1980s, the CIA declassified a document analyzing something called the gateway process, a technique designed to expand human consciousness beyond physical reality using sound frequencies and altered states of awareness. The report didn't treat it like science fiction, it broke it down in technical terms, suggesting that human consciousness might not be confined to the body at all. Instead, it described consciousness as a form of energy that could interact with reality on a different level. The document even proposed that reality itself could be a kind of holographic projection, a system made up of energy frequencies where time and space may not exist the way we perceive them. What makes this so unsettling isn't just the theory, it's the fact that a government intelligence agency studied it seriously, documented it in detail, and then never fully dismissed it. Some of the world's most respected scientists have openly discussed the possibility that we are living in a simulation. Physicist Nick Bostrom proposed that if a civilization becomes advanced enough, it could simulate entire universes, and statistically it would be far more likely that we're inside one than the original real world. Even more unsettling, some physicists have pointed out that the universe appears to have underlying mathematical structures, almost like code, governing everything from particle behavior to the expansion of space. There are thousands of reports from people claiming they've experienced moments where reality seemed to break. Objects disappearing and reappearing in impossible places, people witnessing the same event reset and happen again, or encountering individuals who seem to vanish mid-conversation. While many dismiss these as memory errors or coincidence, the consistency of these stories across different cultures and time periods has led others to wonder, are these just mistakes or are they glitches? Quantum entanglement is a phenomenon where two particles become linked in such a way that changing one instantly affects the other, even if they're separated by vast distances, even across the universe. This spooky action at a distance, as Einstein called it, appears to violate the basic rules of space and time, because no signal should be able to travel faster than light, and yet somehow these particles stay connected. Experiments have repeatedly confirmed this effect, and it doesn't weaken with distance. If information can behave this way, it suggests that everything might be connected beneath the surface, and that space itself may not be as real or as limiting as we think. Some physicists believe that our entire 3D universe might actually be a projection from a two-dimensional surface, like a hologram. This idea comes from attempts to reconcile quantum mechanics with gravity, and surprisingly, the equations behind it work out. In some models, all the information that makes up our reality could be encoded on a distant boundary of the universe, and what we experience is just a projection of that data. If true, that would mean that everything you see, touch, and experience isn't fundamentally real in the way that you think. It's more like an image generated from information stored somewhere else entirely, and we're just inside it. This is creepy. But also, like, if we are in a simulation, like, I feel like I've said this before, but I want to talk to the person who's running it. Sorry, can you help me? Can you make better decisions? Like, do something. Please help me. Like, honestly, I have complaints. Okay. In an even stranger variation of the double slit experiment, scientists found that decisions made in the present can affect how particles behaved in the past. In these experiments, whether a particle acted like a wave or a particle seemed to depend on measurements made after it had already passed through the system. It's not just unusual, it suggests that particle never decided what it was until after the fact. This challenges the idea that events happen in a fixed order. Instead, it raises the possibility that time itself isn't linear and that the future could influence the past, completely breaking our understanding of cause and effect. Some researchers have proposed that space and time might not be continuous, but instead made up of tiny, discrete units like pixels on a digital screen. There appears to be a smallest possible unit of space known as the Planck length, and the smallest unit of time, called the Planck time, beyond which nothing can be divided further. This creates a kind of hard limit on resolution, exactly like a simulation. Some physicists have even suggested that the universe processes information similarly to a computational system. If that's true, then reality might not be smooth and infinite, it might be running on something with limits. Thousands of people vividly remember events, names, and details that never actually existed, at least according to recorded history. From the spelling of famous brands to entire movie quotes that seemingly changed, the Mandela effect has led some to question whether reality itself has been altered or rewritten. What makes it unsettling isn't just that people remember things incorrectly, it's that large groups remember the exact same incorrect details as if something shifted and only some people noticed. Imagine a World War II destroyer disappearing into a green fog. Literally vanishing. That's the claim of the legendary Philadelphia experiment. According to lore, in October 1943, the USS Eldridge was outfitted with secret equipment that rendered it invisible and even teleported it 200 miles away. Witnesses allegedly saw a green mist, and when the ship reappeared, crewmen were inexplicably fused to the metal or driven insane. The US Navy, however, has debunked this story. Official archives say no such teleportation experiment ever occurred, and that Eldridge was never even in Philadelphia at the time. Still, the tale persists as a mind-bending glitch, a mix of rumor, a novel, and possibly misinterpreted World War II tests. Picture walking on a beach and stumbling over a rotten, strange beast, a fur-covered blob with sharp teeth and no eyes. That is exactly what happened at Montauk, New York in 2008. A hunter found a decaying carcass washed ashore and snapped photos of this Montauk monster, sparking wild speculation. News reports said the creature looked otherworldly. Some claimed it was a secret lab animal from Plum Island, or even a leftover of a notorious Montauk Project experiments. More on that later. Experts eventually suggested it was probably a bloated raccoon carcass, but the mystery caught fire online. For days, people debated whether this was science, conspiracy, or a plain animal that nobody could recognize. It was Christmas 1980 in Suffolk, England, and US Air Force personnel at two bases saw something straight right out of science fiction. Late on December 26th, witnesses reported strange lights flashing above Rendlesham Forest. Men with radar even tracked an object disappear behind the trees. A patrol sent in found a triangular craft with glowing lights and 3 landing legs. When soldiers approached, the craft vanished and some men lost consciousness for a few minutes during the encounter. The next night, the deputy base commander led a larger search party. They measured abnormally high radiation at the strange landing site, and multiple groups watched colored beams, a dome-shaped object, and figures moving inside it. To this day, the UFO landing remains one of the most credible military encounters on record. Even a US senator secretly investigated and hinted it was linked to other unexplained UFO events. Whether you believe in aliens or not, the Rendlesham Forest incident is a documented reality bend that has never been fully explained. Deep in a Norwegian valley, something glowing and inexplicable has been appearing since the 1980s. Residents of Hessdalen started seeing mysterious lights in the sky, glowing orbs hovering over the valley floor, darting through the woods, and even following vehicles. Hundreds of these lights were logged. At the peak, up to 20 per week would pop up above Hessdalen. Scientists got involved, of course. In 1983, they launched Project Hessdalen to record and study the phenomenon. In 1 month of field work, they documented 53 occurrences. The lights are typically white or yellow, sometimes pulsating or moving in odd ways. Even today, local cameras capture about 20 sightings a year. No one has nailed down a definitive cause, and theories range from unusual atmospheric plasma to car headlights on distant roads. Okay, this one is terrifyingly real. The US government did conduct mind control experiments on unwitting people. In the 1950s and 60s, the CIA ran a secret program called MKUltra to explore chemical interrogation and behavior control. Under MKUltra, agents dosed hospital patients, prisoners, and even unsuspecting civilians with certain illicit substances. They tried hypnosis, electroshock, and sensory deprivation. Anything to manipulate the human mind. Most records of MKUltra were ordered destroyed, but enough evidence leaked out. We know that it happened. Government reviewers have confirmed MKUltra was active in the 1950s and that many original documents were purposely shredded by top CIA officials. The full extent of the experiments is still unknown, and in casual terms, the CIA really did try to make people hallucinate and break them mentally, a shocking glitch in reality where trusted institutions harmed real human beings. This one sounds completely made up, but has a cult following. In the 1970s and 80s, a decommissioned Air Force base at Montauk, Camp Hero, was rumored to host ultra-secret experiments. In 1992, book Montauk Project Experiments in Time claimed that Montauk became ground zero for bizarre research, from mind control and psychic spying to time travel and dimensional portals. According to the story, scientists built a giant radar tower and tunnel system under Camp Hero. Conspiracy believers talk about thousands of people being taken and turned into these mutant super soldiers controlled by the program. The authors claimed they themselves recovered memories of being experimented on there. There's zero official proof that this ever happened, and the book is widely considered fiction, but the legend still persists. To many, this is a glitch in history, a sensational mix of truth and tall tales that links secret Cold War tech with ideas ripped from a comic book. Whether real or not, the Montauk Project conspiracy adds a very strange chapter to our reality's more unbelievable stories. Imagine a thunderstorm. Suddenly, a fiery ball about the size of a basketball floats into the room through the window and then zaps out of existence. Sounds impossible, and that's exactly what numerous eyewitnesses claim happens with ball lightning. Across history, people report glowing spheres darting through air storms, lasting a few seconds and then vanishing or exploding. Scientists have taken these reports seriously. In fact, a recent review notes that thousands of eyewitness accounts accounts exist, but no one has a solid theory for ball lightning. Instruments rarely capture it since it's unpredictable, so most evidence is anecdotal. The lack of consensus means ball lightning remains a genuine unsolved mystery in atmospheric physics. In other words, nature itself can occasionally glitch, creating luminous orbs that defy explanation and leave observers scratching their heads. Here's a glitch from the world of radio. Imagine you hit the button on your ham radio and call out, "Hello." Then 10 seconds later, you come back on the radio answering yourself. That is the bizarre, long-delayed echo phenomenon. First recorded in 1927 by Norwegian hobbyist Jørgen Hals, he heard a faint echo of a Dutch radio station's signal about 3 seconds after the original transmission. To this day, occasionally a strong radio pulse will return with a multi-second delay, far longer than normal skywave bounces, which take fractions of a second. Scientists have proposed everything from Earth's magnetosphere reflections to bouncing off spacecraft, but there is no consensus explanation. It's a genuine time warp effect in real life. You speak into the ether and then hear an answer way later, as if reality itself slowed down the signal. Late at night, you tune your shortwave radio and suddenly a monotone voice starts reciting random numbers. 7, 3, 4, over and over again. No music, no announcer, just mysterious numbers. These are numbers stations, and they date back to at least World War I. To most of us, they sound spooky and inexplicable, but they are real. Espionage experts believe these stations broadcast coded messages to spies in the field. The sequences of numbers are prearranged codes. Only the intended listener with a matching key can decode them. The stations often have catchy nicknames, and they pop up at scheduled times or seemingly sometimes at random. Despite being understood as spy tools, they feel mysterious. Strangers on the airwaves shouting numbers with no explanation. Amateur sleuths still hunt for new stations and try to crack their codes. Number stations are a real-life oddity, a ghostly radio background of human history that feels as if reality is speaking in cipher. The harsh Ural Mountains of 1959 saw one of history's most gruesome mysteries. A group of 9 experienced Russian hikers set up camp on the slope of a mountain pass now named Dyatlov Pass, but something terrifying happened that night. Searchers later found the tent slashed open from the inside, and the hikers' belongings were left behind. The bodies were scattered around. 2 were found half-dressed near a fire as if they fled the tent in panic. Some of the deceased had bizarre injuries. 1 had a fractured skull, another a twisted neck. 2 were missing their eyes, and 1 woman had no tongue. The Soviet investigators could only rule it as an unknown compelling force that had taken their lives. Decades later, explanations range from avalanches to military tests to Yeti attacks, but none fits all the facts. In short, this remains an unsolved glitch in history. People found dead under inexplicable conditions with no clear culprit. I know depending on who you ask, some say that this case is solved, but the Dyatlov Pass incident still haunts researchers because reality refuses to make sense of what happened that night.
Stuff with ghosts. You probably didn't think I'd be starting off like this, but I think you could make a pretty good argument for paranormal stuff like this being a sign of possible parallel universe. Almost all of us have heard someone's first-hand account of having seen something, or feeling cold spots, hearing noises that don't seem to have a logical explanation. The usual explanation, aside from the ones made by skeptics, is that these are signs of hauntings, usually a dead person who's not able to fully cross over to the other side, so they remain in this limbo between the world of the living and the dead, tied to the places they once called home. But what if these so-called ghosts aren't actually spirits or souls, but glimpses into another universe? What if what we interpret as paranormal activity could be caused by parallel universes overlapping? Imagine it like looking through a frosted window. You can see movement on the other side, shadows and shapes, but they're not really there in the way we understand it. Maybe at times in certain places, the line between dimensions gets a little fuzzy, and you catch a brief glance into a parallel world. Instead of a ghost haunting you, maybe it's just a glimpse of someone from a different version of reality. Next, we've got time slips. Ever had a moment where you're sure you were somewhere but everyone else insists you weren't, or vice versa? Now, if this happens to you a lot, definitely see a doctor before chalking it up to what some idiot online like me says, but if you've been cleared of any early signs of dementia, then maybe something stranger could be going on. Some people think these experiences could be linked to parallel universes, the idea being that we can sometimes slip between timelines. One minute you could be at a party, the next you're back home, but with no memory of how you got there. Or you might be walking down a street and suddenly the surroundings look completely different, like you've been dropped into a past version of your city. This sounds pretty ridiculous, and I can't say that I've ever experienced anything like this, but some people say they have. You can find stories like this all over places like Reddit. Not that you should believe everything you read online, but even if a small handful of these stories happen to be true, that is pretty strange. Some people think time slips could happen when two timelines briefly overlap, and your consciousness gets caught in this switch. You're still you, but somehow you're seeing a different version of events, like a time traveler who doesn't even know that they're time traveling. Now let's talk about something a bit more sciencey, quantum entanglement. This is a phenomenon where two particles become linked in such a way that when something happens to one, the other is instantly affected, no matter how far apart they are. Yes, this really does happen, despite the fact that what I just described doesn't seem to follow the rules of space and time. It's as if the particles are somehow aware of each other across these vast distances. We still don't know exactly why this happens, and if you wanted to make the argument, which I am, it could possibly point to, at the very least, a glitch in the Matrix, similar to the parallel universes theory. A glitch in the Matrix meaning that the world around us is an illusion created by who knows what. Point is, our universe may just be one of many. Could we exist in this complex web of overlapping universes where every now and then one of the strands twitches in a way we don't understand, causing a mysterious and unexplainable phenomena like this? Alright, let's talk deja vu. Sure, this gets talked about a lot, but for good reason. It's pretty disconcerting. Every time it happens, it throws me off. I'm always left with this uneasy, existential dread for about 30 seconds before I get on with my day, but it's this brief reminder that despite everything science tells us, and as clear as the world seems at face value, there are a lot of things we just don't understand. It's eerie, but kind of humbling. How can we be experiencing a sequence of events so specific that we logically know that it's the first time we've lived it, and yet somehow there's this feeling in the pit of our stomach that, no, we've been here before, seen this play out. It's not a memory, more like something you've seen in a dream, maybe? It's vivid yet hazy at the same time. There are tons of theories on deja vu. One being that you have lived the exact moment, but in a different life. That time either runs in a constant loop, or a parallel universe running right along our own briefly overlaps and gives us that strange, uncanny feeling. Think of it like your brain momentarily accessing memories from a different version of yourself, one who's living a slightly different life, but maybe in this other version you did something exactly like what you're doing right now, and for a split second your brain glitches and pulls that memory into the current moment. You're living in the present moment, but your mind receives a kind of signal from a different timeline. So I mentioned glitches in the Matrix a bit earlier, so I want to go into more detail on that. This one is very popular online. Glitches in the Matrix are when people claim to experience weird moments where reality seems to glitch out. Like say you notice what looks to be the same person walking by twice in a row, or objects appearing or disappearing out of nowhere. Just weird stuff like that. Almost like a video game that's failing to render things correctly. The idea here is that we could be living in a simulation, and every so often, the code that runs the simulation gets a little wonky. But to take it a step further, what if those glitches aren't just errors in a simulation, but signs that our universe is brushing up against another one? In theory, if parallel universes do exist, we could occasionally get a peek into them or experience moments where the fabric of space-time bends. Could be as simple as noticing a repeating pattern in your day, but your brain can't quite reconcile with what you know of reality. It's like your system glitches out because it's trying to process something from another universe that doesn't quite match up with your version.
In the 1970s, a classified UK military experiment known as Project Hess allegedly documented multiple cases of soldiers vanishing for several minutes at a time from sealed, secure rooms. The men would reappear exactly where they vanished with no recollection of what happened, only confusion and nausea. Internal memos, declassified decades later, described the disappearances as, quote, brief temporal dislocations and caution about exposure to certain radio frequencies. No official explanation was ever made public, and the files were quietly buried again in the early 2000s. During early high-energy collisions at CERN's Large Hadron Collider, atomic clocks monitoring the site began to show minuscule but measurable discrepancies. Scientists noted in some tests clocks located near the collider would shift by fractions of a microsecond compared to those further away. This should not happen. Time dilation on that scale requires massive gravity or velocity. Some speculated that these could be miniature time slips caused by high energy distortions, possibly even evidence of quantum level glitches. CERN never formally claimed a malfunction of reality, but they did recalibrate every monitoring system afterward. In 2013, users on Reddit and Google Earth forums began reporting something strange. A small German town appeared as usual on Google Earth one day, then disappeared completely the next. Zooming in showed empty green space where buildings had been. Coordinates still worked, but all satellite imagery was gone. Then, 24 hours later, the town reappeared fully intact. Google never addressed the glitch, and there's no public record of map maintenance that day, so was it a software bug, or did reality briefly blink? During a solar eclipse in Zambia in 2022, astronomers and amateur photographers captured something they couldn't explain: a black dot hovering over the center of the sun for exactly 2.3 seconds. Not part of the moon, not a sunspot, just a void. Photos confirmed it, but live video feeds from the same locations showed nothing. Satellite logs from ESA and NASA recorded a momentary dip in light data, as if something absorbed the sun's radiation completely. Some dubbed it a data void. Others wonder if we briefly saw something not meant for us to see. In 2007, Lost Lake in Oregon mysteriously vanished. It happens actually every few years. The entire lake drains within 48 hours. But where does the water go? Geologists discovered a large hole at the bottom believed to be a lava tube from past volcanic activity. But even with that explanation, something just doesn't really add up. GPS mapping shows the volume of water disappearing is far greater than what a lava tube could handle, and it never floods nearby. It just vanishes. Scientists admit they have no complete model for what is going on here. In 1908, something exploded over the Siberian wilderness so violently that it flattened 800 square miles of forest, an area larger than the entire city of London. The shockwave knocked people off their feet hundreds of miles away, but when investigators arrived, they found nothing. No crater, no meteorite, just trees snapped in a radial pattern, some burned from the inside out. To this day, scientists still don't know what caused it. Was it a comet, a black hole, a pocket of antimatter? Whatever it was, it left behind one of the most powerful and unexplained events in Earth's history. Late at night near Marfa, Texas, locals and tourists have reported seeing balls of light dancing just above the desert floor. Called the Marfa lights, these glowing orbs, often the size of basketballs and colored white, blue, yellow, or red, appear completely out of nowhere. Witnesses say the lights can merge together, split apart, hover in the air, or zip off into the distance. What makes it creepier is that they only show up about a dozen nights a year, with no pattern in sight. The first known sighting was in 1883, and the legends grew from ghosts of Spanish explorers to secret alien bases. Scientists have weighed in with more down-to-earth ideas, maybe heated air layers bending distant car headlights, a mirage called a fata morgana, or swirls of methane gas igniting. Some physics students even filmed headlights and got similar glows. Yet even with these theories, no one can completely explain why the lights behave so oddly. There are nights when folks line up with cameras and see nothing, only for the sky to erupt in orbs the next. Scientists still admit nobody knows for sure what they are. The Marfa lights remain a true frontier of mystery, a shimmering glitch on the highway to the underworld. We think of the moon as dead and lifeless sometimes, but one mystery suggests it still holds secrets. Spacecraft orbiting the moon have detected strong, localized magnetic fields locked in some lunar rocks, especially on the far side. That's weird because today the moon has no global magnetic field or active core like Earth does. Submagnetism was expected from billions of years ago when the moon was molten inside, but the amounts on the far side just don't add up. Why are certain patches of lunar soil so strongly magnetized? A team from MIT recently suggested that a gigantic asteroid impact billions of years ago might have blasted the moon with a cloud of plasma and shock waves, magnetizing rocks across the globe. Their computer models show this could explain some of the anomalies on the far side, but even with that theory, the moon's magnetic map has, quote, large parts still unexplained. In other words, nobody has the complete answer yet. The moon seems to be playing a cosmic shell game with magnetism, leaving geologists scratching their heads. It's not a glitch you'd see with your eyes, but a hidden quirk in the moon's memory, and until we bring back more samples, the full story is still up in the air. In March 2014, Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 vanished with 239 people on board. That part is very well known. But what's lesser known is an alternative theory involving the US military base on Diego Garcia, an extremely remote island in the Indian Ocean. Some data suggested the flight veered off course and flew for hours before vanishing a second time, this time near where Diego Garcia is located. Adding to the mystery, multiple people, including a US-based tech worker named Philip Wood, allegedly sent messages from their phones after the disappearance. Wood's supposed message, posted online days later, claimed he was being held on Diego Garcia and included metadata that some claimed pointed to the island. While many dismissed this as a hoax, others were stunned by the implications. There's no confirmed explanation, and the US has never acknowledged anything unusual, but here's the glitch. How did a commercial flight vanish from modern radar, ping satellites for hours, and possibly transmit data from a military zone? Whether the metadata was faked or not, the story stirred paranoia worldwide. It feels like a window into a shadowy corner of our world where time, truth, and tracking technology all failed at once. In the 1970s, a man named Derek Smith was walking near the abandoned RAF Montrose airfield in Scotland when he said he witnessed something out of time. He reported seeing a vintage aircraft, a World War I biplane, approach the field and begin to land. As the plane touched down, the vision faded. The sight was so vivid that Smith later researched the airfield's history and discovered that a pilot named Lieutenant Desmond Arthur had died in a biplane crash there in 1913. What makes this story more chilling is that it wasn't an isolated incident. Over the years, other visitors to RAF Montrose have described similar sightings: a ghostly plane circling, phantom engines humming, and even full apparitions of early 20th century airmen walking the field. Some theories suggest a, quote, time slip, a localized distortion where moments from the past replay in our present. Unlike typical ghost stories, these sightings were investigated by historians and even Air Force personnel who confirmed the area's long-standing reputation. The Royal Air Force eventually fenced off parts of the site, whether it was trauma imprinted on the land or something stranger. RAF Montrose became a real-world glitch where time didn't play by the rules.
The experience of missing time. This one is a classic, especially when it comes to UFOs. There are tons of stories and cases of people driving around a desolate road late at night when they see a strange light in the sky, and then all of a sudden, hours, or sometimes even days have passed that they just have no recollection of. Missing time. Could this phenomenon be connected to parallel universes? Well, the theory is that these abductees may have actually slipped into another timeline. As for whether aliens are involved or not, who knows? Point is, something could shift in the fabric of space-time and your consciousness jumps into a new version of reality, leaving this gap in your memories. It's not so much that time was stolen from you, it's more like you temporarily just moved into another timeline, and when you returned to your own, it felt like you lost those hours. Quantum tunneling is a very bizarre phenomenon where particles can move through barriers that should, according to physics, be impossible. Picture it like a ball traveling through a solid wall instead of bouncing off it. Yes, this does happen, but the science is very hard to explain. Again though, parallel universes, could they play into this? Could particles be tunneling from one reality to another? Instead of just interacting with the particles in our universe, these particles might slip through some sort of portal into another reality. This could help explain some of the bizarre stuff we see in our world that doesn't really make sense. Random moments where the laws of physics seem to just not apply. When it comes to parallel universes, the rules we know might not work the same way, and particles that can tunnel through different dimensions, well, that could be the key to how those universes are crossing paths, even if we don't always notice. Alright, let's switch gears, head up into space. We've got all kinds of mysterious things out there. Strange lights, unexplained radio signals, objects that don't behave how we expect them to. Of course, you know where I'm going with this one, but even some scientists wonder if some of these things could be evidence of parallel universes. Take the WOW signal, for example, an unexplained radio signal detected by astronomers back in 1977 that lasted for about 72 seconds and then disappeared. No one knows where it came from or what caused it. Some think it could have come from a parallel universe, trying to communicate with ours. And yes, it sounds pretty far-fetched, and maybe it is. Maybe there's a much more mundane explanation, but also consider just how vast and mysterious space is, and how little we really understand of it. Looking at it that way, the possibility of another universe interacting with ours in some way seems pretty plausible. Every so often we hear about things that seem to appear out of nowhere. Like maybe you're in your living room, you find a book on your coffee table that you're pretty sure you didn't buy, or maybe you swear you put your keys in one place but you find them sitting in a completely different spot and no one moved them. Or the reverse, objects just disappear without a trace. Can most situations like this be chalked up to our brains just sucking at remembering things sometimes? Sure, but could there also be something else going on in very rare cases? One theory is that this could be the result of objects slipping in and out of parallel universes. Say you leave your socks sitting on the edge of your bed, but when you turn around to grab them, they're nowhere to be found. So you look all over your room only to find that they're actually sitting on your bathroom counter. What if they were simply sucked into another version of reality for a while? Maybe it was in a parallel universe for a second, but when the reality shift happens, it comes back, just not in the same place you left them. Mandela effect. A phenomenon where a large group of people remember something in a certain way only to find out that it never actually happened that way at all. I think what's so interesting about this one is that unlike stuff like deja vu or objects going missing, situations that are a lot more likely to happen in isolation, Mandela effects are corroborated by mass amounts of people. For some context, the name Mandela effect comes from people remembering Nelson Mandela dying in the 80s, when in fact he passed away in 2013. Some people think this is a glitch in our collective memory. Like we've all tapped into a parallel universe where things happen just slightly differently. The list of famous Mandela effects is huge and just continues to grow. From the famous Bernstein Bears versus Bernstein Bears confusion to the misremembered lines from famous movies like Star Wars and Forrest Gump. It's almost like there's a version of reality that some people are still hanging on to, still remembering, even though it never actually existed in our timeline. Again, are these just examples of our collective memory not being the most reliable, or could we just possibly be momentarily connecting to another universe where things unfolded just slightly differently? Back in 2019, a Reddit user named BB Shuri traveled to Greece with her mom and young sister for a 5-day vacation. On the very first day at the hotel, the Redditor noticed a woman sitting with her partner and 3 kids. The second BB saw her face, she was hit with what she described as an overwhelming feeling of recognition and love. It wasn't the normal, maybe I know this person from somewhere kind of feeling. It felt more like seeing someone she'd grown up with. The woman clearly wasn't related to her though. The Redditor immediately told her mom about the experience, expecting to sound crazy, but her mom actually admitted she felt the exact same strange feeling when she saw the woman. For the next few days, Bibi became obsessed with trying to figure out where she could have possibly known the woman from. On the last night of the trip, the Redditor, her mom, and little sister were sitting by the pool drinking mocktails when the woman's toddler wandered over to their table. That finally led to a conversation between the two families. Bibi decided to just be honest and tell the woman she felt like she somehow knew her from somewhere. Instead of being weirded out, the woman immediately responded that she'd been feeling the exact same thing the entire trip. She even said the Redditor's slightly raspy voice sounded familiar to her. So for the next half hour, the two compared everything they could think of, including where they lived, worked, traveled, who they knew, but there was no connection. By the end of the conversation, Bibi Shuri said the only explanation that made sense to her was that they somehow recognized each other on what she described as a soul level. Back in 1972, 4 female college students were driving home to their dorms in Utah after a weekend trip. They were on a familiar desert road near the Nevada border when they crossed a set of railroad tracks and everything changed. The dry, sandy desert was gone, and in its place were green fields of grain and a massive lake. Obviously, they had no idea what the hell was going on. Confused, they tried to just turn around and head back the way they came, but that's when they noticed 4 strange, egg-shaped vehicles following them. They weren't cars, at least not ones they'd ever seen. These ones had 3 wheels and made a high-pitched humming sound. At this point, they weren't just confused, they were terrified. The driver sped off, hoping to find the road they came from. As they drove through a narrow pass, the scenery flickered. Suddenly, they were back in the Utah desert, but it crashed into a ditch. When the police arrived to help them, they found something very odd. The car's tire tracks seemed to stop abruptly in the middle of the desert. There were no tracks leading from the road to the ditch. It was as if the car had simply dropped out of the sky and landed there. The girls maintained their story for years, insisting they'd somehow driven into some sort of parallel reality. In 1901, 2 teachers named Charlotte Mobley and Eleanor Jourdain were visiting the Palace of Versailles in France. While walking toward a small building called the Petit Trianon, they both felt a sudden heavy wave of sadness and a strange stillness in the air. They claimed the wind stopped and everything looked flat, like a painting. They ran into men dressed in long, old-fashioned clothes and small hats who told them which way to go. Eventually, they saw a woman sitting on the grass in an elaborate gown sketching in a notebook. They didn't think much of it until they looked at the maps later. The bridges they crossed, the kiosks they walked past, they apparently didn't exist. And when they returned to the site months later, the landscape was completely different. The paths they'd taken were overgrown or blocked by old walls that had been there for centuries. After some research, they became convinced they'd walked onto the grounds as they appeared in the late 1700s. And the woman with the sketchbook, she looked just like Marie Antoinette. Their account was so detailed, it remains one of the most famous examples of a glitch in reality ever recorded. In October of 1593, a soldier appeared in the main square of Mexico City. He was wearing the uniform of the guards who protected the governor's palace in Manila, in the Philippines. This was pretty strange because the Philippines are thousands of miles away across the Pacific Ocean. Back then, a trip between the two places took months by ship. The soldier, Gil Perez, was just as confused as everyone else, telling the authorities that he'd been on duty in Manila just a few minutes ago. According to him, the governor of Manila had just been killed by Chinese pirates. Not knowing what to do with him, they just threw the soldier in jail. But just 2 months later, a ship arrived from the Philippines, and the crew confirmed the governor had indeed been unalived on the exact day Perez appeared in Mexico. More shocking, one of the passengers on the ship recognized Perez and testified that he'd seen the soldier at the Palace of Manila right before the incident. On July 16, 2008, a Spanish woman named Lorena Garcia Gordo wrote a post on a forum that would go down as one of the most famous cases of reality shifting in modern history. She woke up on what she thought was a normal Monday morning, but as she started her day, she realized her life seemed to be slightly altered. For starters, her bed sheets were a different color. When she went to her job of 20 years, she found her office was in a completely different part of the building, and her boss was a man she'd never met. She was so confused that she just checked her ID and her bank accounts, but they all said she was exactly who she thought she was, thankfully. The most disturbing part involved her personal life, though. She'd been dating a man named Augustin for months, but when she tried to call him, his number didn't work. When she went to his house, he wasn't there. She eventually just hired a private investigator to find him, but the investigator told her there was no record of an Augustin living in that city at all. Somehow Lorena had woken up in a version of reality that was slightly different from the one she grew up in. Sir Victor Goddard was a high-ranking pilot in the British Air Force. In 1935, he was flying over an old abandoned airfield in Scotland called Drem. The place was a ruin. The hangars were falling apart and the landing strips were covered in tall grass and grazing cows. After passing over it, he flew into a strange yellow cloud. The wind picked up, and he felt like he was losing control of his plane. When he flew out on the other side of the cloud, he looked down at the airfield again and suddenly thought that he was losing his mind. The airfield had changed. It now somehow looked brand new. The hangars were repaired and there were 4 planes sitting on the tarmac painted bright yellow. He also saw mechanics moving around in blue jumpsuits. This was strange because in 1935, the Air Force painted their planes silver. The mechanics wore tan uniforms. Goddard flew home and told his friends, but they had no idea what to make of his crazy story and pretty much just brushed him off. Well, 4 years later, in 1939, the Air Force decided to reopen Drem. They started painting their training planes yellow and changed the mechanics' uniforms to blue, and that's when Goddard realized he hadn't just been losing it. For whatever reason, he'd managed to briefly glimpse the future. Either that or his story got around and the Air Force decided to reopen Drem and paint the planes yellow as an elaborate prank on the guy, but I highly doubt that was the case, as hilarious as that would be. In 2006, police in Kiev, Ukraine stopped a man who looked extremely out of place. He was wearing an old-fashioned suit and carrying an antique camera. When they asked for his ID, he handed them a document issued by the Soviet Union in 1958. He identified himself as Sergei Ponomarenko and seemed genuinely confused by why the buildings around him looked so modern and why everyone was carrying what he referred to as small glass rectangles in their hands. The police thought he was mentally ill and took him to a clinic. The doctor there asked to develop the film in Sergei's camera, and when they did, they found that the photos showed Kiev exactly as it looked, but in the 1950s, including a photo of a guy who looked a lot like Sergei with a woman. There was also a photo of a strange bell-shaped object floating in the sky. While the film was being processed, Sergei vanished from his locked room at the clinic, which was also guarded by security. The police eventually found the woman from the photo, who was now in her 70s. She confirmed that Sergei had been her boyfriend, but that he disappeared in 1958 after going out to take photos of a strange object that he saw in the sky. This next story comes from Reddit user Mothy187, who said they came home from the grocery store and started unloading bags into their second-floor apartment. At one point, they specifically remembered taking out a pound of hamburger meat out of one of the bags and placing it on the counter. They then went back outside to grab the rest of the groceries from the car. When they came back, inside the hamburger meat was gone. The narrator said they lived alone, had no pets, there were no open windows. The apartment was also laid out in a way where nobody could have entered or left without having been noticed. At first they thought maybe they imagined buying it, but after checking the receipt, hamburger meat was listed there. Mothy187 said it never showed up again. They eventually had to go back to the store and just buy another package. Reddit user RoutinePlant8549 shared a bizarre story that happened to their sister while she was alone at work, and to this day, nobody's been able to explain it. During the sister's lunch break, she went upstairs to the office kitchen to heat up some food in the microwave. While waiting, she cleaned her coffee mug and specifically remembered the sink being completely empty afterward. There were no dishes, utensils, or random items left behind. She then went back downstairs to eat at her desk and continue working. A short time later, she returned to the kitchen to clean up after lunch, but the second she looked at the sink, something immediately caught her attention. Sitting right in the middle of it was a small clear plastic bag that definitely hadn't been there before. Curious, she picked it up and was stunned to see 2 passport-sized photos of her son inside. The photos were several years old and had originally been taken for a school application. The photo package came with 4 copies in total. 1 had been used for the application, while the remaining 3 were stored together in that exact plastic bag, but inside a box at home along with other important school documents. When the sister got home later that day, she checked that box. Somehow, only 1 photo was still inside. The other 2 ended up at her office somehow. and nobody knew how the hell those pictures could have possibly ended up in her office kitchen sink. That is creepy. In 1979, two couples were driving through France on their way to Spain. They were looking for a place to stay and found a very old-timey hotel. The windows had heavy wooden shutters and no glass, and the staff all wore clothing from a bygone era, it looked like. The rooms were incredibly cheap, too. They had a meal, stayed the night, and took photos of themselves standing in front of the building. On their return trip, they decided to stay at the same hotel again because it was so charming, but they couldn't find it. They drove up and down the same stretch of road a couple times, but it wasn't there. They asked locals for directions, but no one had ever heard of a hotel in that area. When they got their film developed, the photos they took at the hotel were missing, even though the photos taken before and after the stay came out perfectly. The couples later found out that the uniforms they described were from a style of dress that hadn't been used in France for over 100 years. It was as if some old hotel had temporarily materialized into reality for one night then vanished.
We have celebrity matches. If you've been watching this channel for a while, then you will have for sure heard about the strange thing that has popped up several times, and that is celebrity doppelgangers. It's something that has been brought up so many times, and not just on Most Amazing Top 10, but with people all around the world. It's strange that so many famous people have matches that look almost identical throughout history. Now, is this because the rich and famous are actually immortals that will never die and the Illuminati is real and one day they will eat our souls or something like that? I can't remember how it's supposed to go. Or is it because the universe only has so many models that it can throw out through its random person generator, and this is why we have had a couple glitches in the Matrix and these people look so alike, they look like they're carbon copies of each other? Or is it just because people can look alike and it's not that crazy? I don't really have an answer for this question. I mean, who do you think I am? I'm just as confused as you are. Coming at number 9, we have a glitch to a new location. Don't you hate when there's a glitch in a game and it stops you from being able to pick up an item that is usually a key item that you need to progress, and then you have to reload an old save and it's all kinda lame? Well, for this story we have to head over to the wonderful world of Reddit, and we're going to bring up a story from Spirity, that is the Reddit user's name. They talked about a very strange day they had back in 2018. This is how it played out. They got up, they grabbed their things, they headed out to a gas station to grab some stuff before they went to work. They paid for everything via debit card, and then when they got back in their car, they couldn't find their debit card anywhere. Spirity remembered throwing their debit card in the cup holder between the two seats, but it wasn't there. So they searched all over the car, but no luck. They figured that they would find it later or just get a new card, so they headed to work. When they got home that night, they found their debit card sitting on the kitchen table. Okay, this is very creepy. Now, to be sure they weren't going crazy, they checked their bank account to see if they made a debit payment at the gas station, and sure enough, they did. What on earth could this have been? But I wouldn't feel too shaken about it, because if it is a simulation that we're living in, it seems like the simulation is on your side. Coming in number 8, we have a doppelganger reset. If you were to run into a person who looked just like you, what would you do? Would you go up to them and be excited you met your long lost twin and now you can be friends forever? Or would you try and kill them before they kill you so you can gain their power, because there only can be one? Well, no matter what your reaction, seeing your clone walking around in the wild would freak you out a little bit. Well, this story was snagged off the interweb, and it goes like this. A young professional was walking down the street and they were in a little bit of a rush to get to work on time, and they stopped at a crosswalk of a busy intersection in downtown Chicago. There were cars zooming by, and then waiting to cross towards them was someone who looked identical to them. And not just a little bit, they were dressed the same way, they had the same hair, the same bag. It was like looking in a mirror. Then, just as the information was processing in their mind, a bus passed by and they broke eye contact. When the bus was gone, so was the clone. Did this person just imagine a double of themselves? Or did the Matrix realize that there was a glitch and then move their clone to another server? Next on the list, we have an extra life. This one was snagged right off of Reddit, and it's a pretty strange story. A Redditor talked about the time that their dog passed away. This is a very sad moment in anyone's life, but it's something that all pet owners must face. All of us will most likely outlive our pets. But here's something very strange that happened afterwards. They were sad for some time, but then they saw some signs around town about some dogs that were up for adoption, and one of the dogs in the photo looked just like their dog that had just passed away, but it was a younger version. They immediately called the person selling off these pups and they rushed over. They said it was like an instant connection, like their dog that had just passed away was brought back to them. Now, this was probably just a coincidence, but it might have been the Matrix reloading an old save file so this person didn't feel so sad about losing their dog. It's actually a really nice one.
Is it possible that we're all immortal? Not in the way that you'll never age or anything like that, but in a more like you'll never die kind of way. It's called quantum immortality, and it's one of the weirder consequences of quantum physics. Here's the basic idea. Most of us have probably heard of the theory that multiple realities form from every decision we make, every situation we find ourselves in. In quantum mechanics, there's a theory that every time something happens, the universe splits, creating a parallel universe where things went the other way. For example, let's say you're walking across the street and you nearly get hit by a bus. Close call. Well, in another reality, the bus didn't miss. In another, you were nowhere near it. In another, the bus didn't even show up. Now, you, the observer, are at the center of your own timeline. Here's where the immortality aspect comes in. If you can't observe a version of the universe where you're dead, you'll always end up in the one where you survive. That means every time you should have died, you just didn't. At least you don't experience the version where you did. From your point of view, you'll always wake up in the version of reality where you lived. Sure, other people might attend your funeral in their timelines, or the ones you used to be in, but you never actually experience death. You just keep shifting into the universe where you dodged the bullet. Now, I'm not exactly sure where old age comes into this. I mean, eventually we all do die, right? But I don't know, maybe reincarnation plays into this somehow. Look, it's totally unprovable, but it's a neat idea, and at the very least, maybe there's a version of all of our lives where we make it to 100 and pass away peacefully in bed, rather than dying in some awful accident or something. Pan Am Flight 914 is a story that keeps getting passed around because, real or not, it's an interesting story. A Pan Am Douglas DC-4 with 62 people on board took off from New York, headed to Miami on July 2nd of 1955. It vanished. Radio contact was lost, and it was presumed to have crashed. But then something weird happens, just not for another 37 years. In 1992, the same plane allegedly appeared out of nowhere on the radar of an airport in Venezuela. Air traffic control made contact, and the pilot sounded confused, saying they were en route to Miami and due to land at 9:55 a.m., as if no time had passed. The story goes there were witnesses who said the tower told the pilot where he was, which reportedly freaked him out. He supposedly panicked, restarted the engines, and took off again before anyone could stop him. The plane eventually landed in Miami shortly afterward, but authorities supposedly kept the incident quiet. Some versions of the story say the passengers were dazed, carrying outdated newspapers and IDs with no idea that they just jumped forward in time. But is this just an urban legend, or did something actually unexplainable happen that was quickly covered up? The Large Hadron Collider has been at the center of multiple wild theories ever since it switched on in 2008. Officially, it's a massive particle accelerator built by the European Organization for Nuclear Research, or CERN. It was created to smash atoms together at insane speeds in order to study the makeup of the universe. But there are plenty of people who think that something very strange happened when this thing was switched on, that a sort of Pandora's box was unleashed. One theory is that when the LHC fired up, there was this shift, that it either created a parallel universe or blended ours with another. The timing does kinda line up with when people started reporting strange phenomena on a big scale. The Mandela effect, for example, really exploded in popularity around the same time, but people also started sharing more personal stories on internet forums about how time just didn't seem to be moving right anymore, or how reality felt off in subtle ways they couldn't quite explain. And it didn't help that in 2016, CERN released a video of what looked like a human sacrifice ritual taking place on their grounds, which they later said was a prank. And do I believe that? Yeah, first of all, I just think that's a funny idea. I love that they went there. And I also just don't think there was a genuine ritual sacrifice captured on camera here. For anyone who is already skeptical though, they were even more skeptical after this. But what do you think? Have you noticed weird shifts in your reality since 2008? I'll give you this, it is a weirder world we're living in. A woman named Pam Reynolds was brain dead for over an hour. Somehow, she came back describing things she couldn't have possibly known. In 1991, Reynolds underwent a rare procedure called a standstill operation to remove a brain aneurysm. Her body temperature was lowered significantly, her heartbeat and brain activity were completely stopped, and her eyes were taped shut. She was clinically dead, and yet, after she was revived, she gave eerily accurate descriptions of the operating room. She even described the exact surgical tools being used and recounted conversations between doctors. That's because when she was under, she claimed that she floated out of her body and saw herself laying on the table before being pulled toward a tunnel of light. She said she met dead relatives there who communicated with her without speaking, and that she needed to be convinced to return to her body, which of course she did. But what exactly happened here? How could someone with no brain function, no sensory input, describe real-time events in such clear detail? Till this day, there's never been a definitive explanation for this. Ong's Hat was a real village in New Jersey, now abandoned. In the late 80s though, pamphlets and documents started surfacing claiming secret experiments happened there involving interdimensional travel. So a group called the Institute for Chaos Studies allegedly set up a lab in the Pine Barrens. There they built a device known as the Egg, a sensory deprivation pod meant to alter consciousness. The theory was that under the right conditions, the pod could shift someone into a parallel universe. Well, supposedly it worked. Some of the researchers vanished, remaining in some alternate version of Earth. These so-called documents circulated in zines and early internet forums. Nowadays, this is mostly seen as a hoax, and I'm sure a lot of people also saw it that way back then, but some still insist there was something strange actually going on here, that maybe, at the very least, the story was some sort of cover-up for actual experiments with, fictional elements used to discredit anything and distract people from anything disturbing that was actually happening. I don't know, what do you guys think of this one? Bold Street has become a rather infamous area in Liverpool, where dozens of people have claimed to experience time slips. One story goes that a young woman named Imogen had gone shopping for some things for her sister's new baby. As she walked toward the corner of Lord Street in Whitechapel, she was excited to see a new mother care store that she hadn't noticed before. Inside, she browsed through items like baby cardigans and bibs, surprised at how cheap everything was. When she went to pay with her credit card at the front, the cashier looked confused and called the manager over. The manager turned and told Imogen that they didn't accept credit cards, only cash. Since she had none on her, Imogen left empty-handed, but when she told her mother what happened, her mom looked stunned. The mother care store had closed years ago, and the spot was now a bank, the very bank her mom used. And that's not the only weird story to come out of Bold Street. In 2006, a young man named Sean was caught shoplifting in Liverpool. While fleeing down Hanover Street, he turned into Brooks Alley, a dead end. As he caught his breath, he suddenly felt strange, like the air had thickened. He basically just waited for the security guard to follow, but no one came. Confused, Sean stepped back out into Hanover Street and instantly knew something was wrong. The street looked older. The cars were vintage. Roadworks he'd seen earlier were gone. People walked by in these outdated clothes, and there were traffic lights where there shouldn't be any. Sean pulled out his phone. There was no signal. He rushed towards Bold Street and spotted a newspaper stand. The date on the paper was May 18th, 1967. Terrified, Sean ran to a jewelry store where he pulled out his phone again, and this time it worked. Just like that, he was back in the present. Later, when he told his story to the local press, he repeated it in the exact same way every time, and while people assumed he made it up to dodge shoplifting charges, the newspaper followed up, and not only did they find his account consistent, but all the historical details he described, down to the clothes, the street layout, businesses, they were accurate for Liverpool in 1967. Even the security guard kinda backed it up. He said when he chased Sean into Brooks Alley, the kid had simply vanished. On November 9th of 1986, Spanish industrial expert Pedro Olivia Ramirez was driving from Seville to Alcalá del Guadira late at night. He knew the road well, But suddenly, after a curve, everything changed. The road widened into 3 massive lanes in each direction, surrounded by tall, strange buildings that he didn't recognize. On one side were huge glowing industrial buildings, on the other were these towering apartment buildings with 20 floors or so. None of it made sense, and things just got weirder from there. Pedro started to feel a wave of heat inside his car, along with strange voices, almost like a distant choir. One voice told him he'd been transported to another country or possibly another planet by extraterrestrials. And for the next couple hours, he drove through this strange place, even stopping a couple times to walk along the roadside and study the odd grass and the bizarre traffic. Notice that cars passed him every 8 minutes or so, like clockwork. Eventually, Pedro reached a road sign with directions to his home or where he was coming from. Well, he chose to retrace his steps, but he suddenly found himself parked in front of his house, and he had no memory of how he got there. He tried to retrace his path, but the wide roads, the buildings, and the strange signs were gone now. And somehow the trip, which should have only taken him about 30 minutes, had lasted over 3 hours, and he'd burned way more fuel than normal. Back in 2007, a security camera at the courthouse in Santa Fe caught something weird early in the morning around 7 a.m. On the footage, there's this glowing white thing, kind of round, kind of shapeless too, just drifting across the frame. It wasn't fast or anything, just sort of floating there. People online immediately started calling it a ghost. Obviously, I mean, what else are people gonna say? Well, some said it looked more like something out of phase with reality, like we were seeing a bleed through from somewhere else entirely. The way it moves doesn't look like a reflection or a glitch. It looks like it's there, just not in the way anything else usually is. Of course, the official explanation was that it was a bug walking across the lens, and sure, it could be that, but what do you think? Does it really look like a bug? People in different parts of the world have filmed what looks like 2 suns in the sky at the same time. One bright sun and then a second one that looks slightly smaller but still glowing like a legit celestial body. Naturally, a lot of people are pretty confused about this. Some folks say it's just a lens flare. Others say that nope, that was actually in the sky. So scientists have looked into it, like Jim Kaler, an astronomer from the University of Illinois, who says it's probably some kind of atmospheric optical illusion, light bending in weird ways because of moisture or temperature layers in the air, but even he is not 100% sure what the hell's going on. Mirages usually stack vertically, like one image above the other. This double sun thing is side by side, which makes a little less sense, so no one knows exactly what causes it. Grant Perry, another scientist, flat out said this is not a common optical phenomenon. So yeah, maybe it's just a weird trick of the light, or maybe we're seeing something that we can't even begin to comprehend. So this one is pretty wild. There's a CCTV clip that's become pretty well known for how downright bizarre it is. A guy is walking down the street at night. A second man enters the frame in front of him, at which point the first guy does something super weird. The guy in the back taps the dude in the front on the shoulder right as a car whizzes by and a metal object swings out as the guy in front is about to get swatted with it. If it weren't for the tap, he would have been hit, no question. The guy who does the tapping seems completely unfazed though. He's not panicking, he doesn't even look back to check if the car's about to hit him. How did he know what was about to happen? It's also strange because he doesn't even say anything. Doesn't stick around to be like, oh damn, wasn't that nuts? It's almost like he knew exactly what was going to happen and was just doing his part to stop it. And then he's out. Naturally, the internet lost its mind with theories. The most popular one, the guy giving the warning is a time traveler. Maybe he's from the future, maybe a version of the guy in front of him from a different reality, trying to make sure his past self doesn't die in a freak accident. Could this be a huge coincidence? Maybe, but maybe not. So this is some straight up NPC behavior, except in real life. So a guy in Omsk, Russia wakes up one morning and can't find his flock of sheep. Usually he expects to find them right where he left them, but not today. He goes out looking for them and to his surprise finds the entire flock of sheep standing on top of a roof. Now there's no obvious way for these sheep to get up there, no secret sheep elevator that we know of anyway. The man assumed they'd somehow gotten spooked by something and just climbed up the roof. How the hell do a bunch of sheep get up there without making a noise or causing a ruckus? It's like they just teleported to the top, like an NPC glitch in a video game randomly appearing on a roof. Next we have space orcs. Orcs standing for odd radio circles. So what are these? Well, they're actually what the name suggests, massive circular blobs in space that show up in radio telescope images. And no one really knows what they are. They were first discovered in 2020 when astronomers were mapping the sky using Australia's ASCAP radio telescope. These huge rings appeared out of nowhere, perfectly circular, massive in size, and didn't match anything scientists had seen before. They aren't galaxies, stars, supernova remnants, or anything that usually pops up in space surveys. Some scientists think they might be the result of huge explosions or collisions far, far away, cosmic shockwaves that left behind radio footprints we're just now seeing. But others think they could have something to do with galaxies which have active black holes at their centers. And then there's the more exciting possibility that orcs might be a sign of something completely new, some sort of phenomenon we just don't have a name for yet. Point is, for as much as we think we know, the world is a highly mysterious place. The first sign that you're probably experiencing a glitch in reality is that you spot an animal completely frozen in place. Not in a video game you're playing, mind you, but while out in the so-called real world. Sounds crazy? Well, take a look at this. This video was posted to Reddit by user Upstairs Cash 8400. It's kind of unsettling, and if it were just an empty street with this bird in the sky, I wouldn't really think much of it. But what really sells it for me are the mother and son looking up at it, completely confused about what the hell they're looking at. Like, is that what I think it is? A bird just frozen in the sky? Sure, they could be part of the hoax, but if so, they do a good job at playing it off realistic and subtle. This is a very strange video, especially because all there is behind the bird is open air. It's not like it's up close to a building where you could just chalk the bird up to being a sculpture or something. It's just hovering in the air, no string, nothing. You're driving down the road and spot two cars whose license plates are just a little too perfect to be random. This image was posted to Reddit by Veruca Moon. One car with a plate reading peekaboo and one next to it reading I see you. Some may view this as a funny little coincidence. Others may find something slightly more ominous about it, as if the universe itself was subtly winking at the driver as if to say, someone or something is always watching you. Now, if you think, well, these two cars, I mean, they had to have been together. They were just messing with everyone. Well, think again. According to Veruca Moon, the cars went their separate ways at the next intersection. Anyway, whether you believe that this is a genuine case of the Matrix glitching or not, it's a pretty wild coincidence. The universe is just funny sometimes. You see two unrelated men who look almost identical. This image was posted by Talis Gabriel to the Glitch in the Matrix subreddit. Two guys on completely different soccer teams who just happen to look like twins. Not only do they have the same hairstyle and beards, I mean that's surface level, their facial structure is also very eerily similar. And if you're thinking they're the only odd thing about this image, look closer. Yeah, that guy sitting in the back looks a lot like them as well. He's further away and has his hood up, so it's hard to say for sure, but from what I can tell, we might have a glitch in the Matrix triplet situation on our hands. What do you think though? Just a coincidence that these doppelgangers just happen to find themselves in the same place at the same time, or was there a glitch in the simulation? Just what in the hell is going on here? Have you ever seen clouds formed with a perfect straight edge like this? Prince 10,001 posted this picture to Reddit and it got a lot of people talking, with the top comment reading, "It's official, we're living in Minecraft." It really does look like the sky in an early 2000s video game that just hasn't finished rendering yet. Like if you were to continue walking closer to those clouds, more would suddenly form out of nowhere on the horizon. Are we living in someone's janky computer game? Or are these secret weather control experiments just getting really weird? It's such a surreal looking image, isn't it? It's like some godly entity flew up into the sky and just cut out a section of the clouds like they were trimming their hedges or something. Of course, there's also the possibility that this is just a Photoshop job, but if genuine, that would have been a very strange sight to see. Are you a superstitious person? Do you think stray black cats bring bad luck? If so, you'd probably have a heart attack seeing this. 4 black cats on 4 separate benches posted by Rage Millie with the heading Control-C plus Control-V as a reference to copy and paste. Adding to the weirdness, 3 of these cats are also sitting right at the end of their respective benches. The only odd one out is the one furthest away, and it's in motion, so who knows where it ended up finally sitting down. I gotta say, I love cats, but they can be pretty creepy at times. This may be one of those cases. I mean, it's also very cute, but definitely odd. Would you decide to sit on one of these benches, by the way? I'd be half expecting the cats to swarm me and then start pawing and biting as punishment for moving in on their turf. It's like they're a gang of cats. Once again, is this just a case of cats being weird, or did the program running our simulation just get a little lazy? Don't you hate it when something goes missing? You spend days looking for it, decide to finally replace it, only to have the original item show up again as if it glitched out of reality and then just randomly popped back in. Well, that's exactly what happened to this Reddit user, Your Average Sprite. She posted this image here, with the caption reading, "My husband lost his $70 blade a few months ago. He looked everywhere and just assumed someone had stolen it. He bought another just like the old one. After a couple months, he wakes up today and finds the original sitting in the middle of his cushion on the couch, as if it never left." Super weird, but it's surprising how often this actually happens. The fact that you can look in every nook and cranny for something and then just have it reappear out of nowhere, it's insane. Some of these cases can definitely be chalked up to pranks or just not having looked as thoroughly as you thought, but there are those instances where you just scratch your head and go, I have no logical explanation for this. This next story is called The Disappearing Dog Walker, posted to Reddit by Jin is Equia, who writes, "The other day, coming home from work on my bicycle, it happened that as I approach the curb in front of my house, I see a guy walking his dog, approaching the same spot. So I do that mental calculation you do to avoid awkwardness, and I pull in and hurry a bit to get off the sidewalk onto my front path so I won't be in his way. As I'm picking up my bike to go upstairs, I'm sort of half waiting for him to go by to make sure, but he never did. I look up and down the block, but he's vanished, and there is literally nowhere he could have gone in that same time where I wouldn't still see him. So tonight I'm just doing stuff online, and I keep thinking I hear a cat outside. I looked out the door, nothing. Keep hearing it, so I look again. Across the street is what looks like the same guy walking his dog again. At 3 a.m., by the way. I glanced to one side for a moment and back. Dude is gone again. Not a trace. Stood and watched for a while, just not there. Nowhere he could have gone. I don't know what to think. Sometimes in video games, NPCs will show up in odd spots. They'll disappear into walls, they'll randomly float through the air, suddenly appear on roofs with no obvious access point. It's hilarious. Take these sheep here. What video game is this from, you ask? Well, none. This is a real piece of footage. The clip was posted to Reddit by user DocsHoax, who writes, "A man lost a flock of sheep and found them on the roof of the hayloft. How they got there is unclear. It all happened near Omsk. In the morning, the worker did not find his sheep in the usual place and went to look. The search result was surprising. All the artiodactyl roofers were found on the roof of the neighbor's hayloft. The owner assumed they were scared of something and climbed up. As a result, all the sheep were safely lowered to the ground." You know what would probably have me second guessing if the world around us really exists or not? If everything and everyone just suddenly stopped. This story is called Time Froze. It was posted to Reddit by Electronic Trust 481. I had just gotten off the bus and was waiting for my light to turn green. I had my headphones in, I was jamming out, and then the light finally turned green. None of the cars were moving, so I assumed there was an ambulance. I took one of the headphones out to listen, but I didn't hear any sirens, so I look around and not a single person or car is moving. This lasted about a minute. Finally, I figured, F it, I'm gonna go. And as soon as my foot hit the pavement, everyone starts moving again. The cars, the people. It was like time stopped, and I got this unsettling feeling in my stomach as if they were all waiting on me to make the first move. What made it even more unsettling was everything was quiet. You know how people say when everything goes silent in a forest in the woods, you run? It usually means something predatory is in there with you. That's what it felt like. I still have no explanation for what happened that day. This last video was posted to Reddit by Downtown issue 1421, and while I'm not saying this is a genuine glitch in the Matrix situation, it is very strange. Notice something odd about this mall? Yeah, all the stores are for smartphones. Downtown issue 1421 wrote, "I took a last-minute trip to Bolivia. Did the simulation not have enough time to render and just spawned every store in this mall in as smartphone stores?" It's a pretty weird video, and aside from the fact that quite literally, based on the parts of the mall you see in the clip anyway, every store is a smartphone store, there's also something eerie about the mall itself. It has that kind of bizarre, liminal, spacey kind of vibe about it. I just also wonder how all these places stay in business. Like, who's going to all these different cell phone shops? Is the entire mall just one big front for something? Kinda seems like it.
Next on the list we have the helicopter. Here's something that had everyone scratching their heads. Here's a video of a helicopter taking off without the blades moving. If you were to tell me that this video was real, I would just think that it was in the early stages of animation and someone hadn't got to the propeller yet, or this whole thing was being lifted by a crane. That would seem like the most logical answer. But apparently this thing is actually flying. The official statement is that the shutter speed of the camera matches the propeller speed, so it looks like it's not moving. Or was this a glitch caught on camera? I mean, it looks super trippy, and it looks like the most standard glitch that you could see in a video game. So was this a real life glitch just like a game? Or was it the shutter speed thing? I mean, we all know that it's the shutter speed thing, but it's still fun to think about it. Next on the list, we have a palette swap. You know, some games will randomly generate characters, so sometimes you can get some creatures that seem to be very similar to one another. And right here we have a palette swap on the subway that makes these characters seem very alike. So when you look at these guys, it seems pretty strange that they both have boss sweaters on that match the other person's hair, and these aren't standard hair colors. One dude has bright orange hair and the other guy has green hair. How do you get a mix-up like that unless the software that Elon Musk says runs the world goes a little bit haywire? Next on the list we have Baldy. So if two people who look the same way wasn't enough to make you think that there could be some glitches in the Matrix, then let me show you this. What about 5 bald dudes on the bus all sitting in a row? Now I know that's very common for men to lose their hair as they get older, but what were these bus dudes up to? It looks like they're all in a club for dudes who have a cul-de-sac haircut. What are the chances of these dudes all being lined up so perfectly? Thank God we have cameras on us all the time now so we can catch stuff like this in the wild. Who cares about the Matrix when it comes to gold like this? This one was just funny. Next on the list we have seeing the Matrix. This is what it's all about, am I right? This is what the people want to be able to do. You want to be able to see the Matrix and see the code passing by your eyes so you can work through it, so you can manipulate it, so you can become a god among men and ascend to Olympus to live among Zeus and the other immortals. Well, there was one person on Reddit who might have had a glitch happen to them that allowed them to see through time and space itself. This person said it started as a headache. They would get this weird pain in the back of their head before they would go to bed, and while they were sleeping, they would have vivid dreams. It only took them a couple days, but they realized that these dreams were becoming reality. There were key moments throughout their day that they had foreseen, and they started to use this to their advantage. They would know when something bad was going to happen and they could avoid it. Or there was one point where they knew to buy a lottery ticket that would give them $1,000. But the headaches were getting worse, and eventually this led to them having a seizure. They were taken to the hospital, and after this, a doctor gave them an MRI on their head, but they found nothing. And then the pain stopped, and also the vision stopped. Next on the list, we have the mirror doesn't match. We all understand what a mirror does and what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to reflect our image. Well, then why the hell does this happen? Okay, how on earth does that happen? We clearly see that the movement between these two images is off. It looks like there's a delay or whatever that's supposed to be happening on the mirror is glitching out. I'm sure that if someone jumps into the comments right now, they can break down why this is normal, but until that happens, this one is still freaking me out. And coming into the number 1 spot, we have Elon Musk. I think you all know this man's name because he just became the richest man in the world. He is the face of the powerhouse company known as Tesla, who has been seeing their stock shoot through the roof. He's also the mind behind SpaceX, the company that wants to take us to the stars and plop us right on Mars to start a new life out there. I don't know how I feel about living on Mars. It's not the most exciting thing to me. I think I'll stay down here with all the chaos we already have. Now, what Elon has also talked about is how he thinks that we're all living in a simulation. that everything is planned out mathematically, and through this, it is proof that everything is running on a program. It's up to you whether or not you want to believe him. Simulation theory sounds to me like a modern version of religion. Everyone is constantly searching for an explanation for our existence. But if you're able to become the richest and one of the most powerful people in the world, then you might know what a couple of the hacks are. Yeah.
Looking at here is obviously police inspecting a crashed car, but this was no normal car. This is known as the Surrey ghost car case. On December 11th of 2002, multiple calls came into the police about a car swerving off the road and crashing into a ditch near an exit ramp in Surrey, England. Police show up, expecting to find a fresh crash and maybe help a driver in trouble, but they find something stranger. At first, the officers don't see anything unusual, it's just another crash site, but as they get closer, they spot this old, overgrown vehicle. And they do find the driver, but he's no longer alive, and hadn't been for a long time. And I don't mean hours, I mean months. It was the body of a man named Christopher Brian Chandler. He'd been missing for months. Based on the state of the car and the body, the police quickly determined the crash had happened 5 months earlier, back in July of the same year. Christopher's family confirmed that he had been missing since then. So the question was, what were people actually seeing on that cold December night when they phoned the police? There were no other accidents to be found. Some people believe they were seeing a sort of ghost car, a glimpse into another reality. Could it have been a time slip where the crash from the past somehow overlapped with the present moment? Some people think the reports of a crash were from a parallel universe or timeline, and the car appeared in real time for just a brief moment before disappearing. No one really knows for sure, and we'll probably never get the full answer, but it's a perfect example of how strange the world can be, and that maybe there's more going on than we can ever hope to understand. Now, what you're looking at here is known as a cold spot, deep out in space. Back in 2004, astronomers detected an anomaly in the cosmic microwave background, or CMB, the faint afterglow of the Big Bang. This cold spot is noticeably cooler than its surroundings, spanning approximately 1.8 billion light years. At first, scientists attributed this to a vast, empty supervoid, a massive region with fewer galaxies, but studying it further using more precise measurements, there's some doubt about that explanation, suggesting the void might not be as large or as empty as they thought. Well, so what does this mean though? Well, the discrepancy has led some researchers to wonder if the so-called cold spot could be the result of our universe colliding with another universe during the early stages of cosmic inflation. A collision like that could have left an imprint in the CMB, giving us possible evidence for the existence of parallel universes. This is the Antarctic Impulsive Transient Antenna, or ANITA for short. It's a NASA-funded experiment designed to detect high-energy cosmic neutrinos by capturing radio waves emitted when these particles interact with the Antarctic ice sheet. During its flights, ANITA spotted several events where particles appeared to be traveling upward through the Earth instead of coming down from up in space. Scientists were very confused because that's not supposed to happen. Particles like neutrinos had never been seen passing through the Earth like that. Well, one hypothesis is that these anomalies could be explained by the existence of a parallel universe where the laws of physics, including the direction of time, are reversed. In this scenario, particles originating from a mirror universe could travel upward through our planet. In 2019, scientists dropped what looked like a blurry orange donut onto the internet and basically broke science Twitter for a week. What people were seeing was the first real photographic evidence of a black hole, snapped by the Event Horizon Telescope. Now, what we're looking at isn't the black hole itself, technically, because physics just won't let us actually see the thing. What it is the glowing gas and light bending around the edges of the black hole. That ring is the Event Horizon, a one-way ticket to nowhere. Or maybe somewhere else. See, theoretical physicists like Nikodem Pawlowski think that black holes might not just absorb stuff into nothingness, but may instead be gateways to other universes. His theory says when matter collapses into a black hole, it might not get crushed out of existence, but instead get funneled into an entirely new universe on the other side. Like, imagine every black hole being the Big Bang for a different reality. It's all based on some deep theoretical physics. No one can prove it yet, but it does fit in with the idea about multiverses and bouncing universes instead of just one big beginning. So yeah, maybe this blurry space donut isn't just a hole, maybe it's a door. What you're looking at here is a piece of what's called Kirlian photography. Back in the late 1930s, a guy named Simon Kirlian figured out that if you zap something with a high voltage current and take a picture of it, you get these weird glowing outlines around the object. Plants, apples, people's fingers, suddenly they all looked like they had some kind of electric aura around them. It was like photographing life energy, or maybe something from some other reality bleeding into ours. Now, people still argue about what this actually shows. Some say it's just moisture or static or whatever. Cool, noted. But we're here to talk about the weird and unexplained. So others think this glow is something deeper, a glimpse into another layer of existence, something we can't see with our eyes, but might be there all the time, kind of like the Force. Some even claim these energy fields shift with your mood or health, and if you believe the more far-out theories, you're literally watching energy from another dimension react in real time. No one's ever managed to fully explain it, but the fact that a basic electrical rig might be snapping pics of alternate layers of reality, that's the kind of stuff that does keep you up at 3 a.m. scrolling deeper and deeper into the weirder parts of the internet. You don't often hear about UFO stories from the 1500s, and that's exactly why I find this case so incredibly fascinating. In Nuremberg, on the early morning of April 14th, 1561, people stepped outside to see the sky absolutely filled with mysterious flying objects, glowing spheres, cylinders, crosses, hundreds of them. And they were all battling each other. People watched as these red arcs shot out these smaller balls and rods that started slamming into each other, spinning wildly through the air. This went on for over an hour. Witnesses described the objects like they were exhausted warriors, eventually falling toward the ground in clouds of smoke, burning as they dropped. And then this massive black spear appeared in the sky, stretching across from one horizon to another, motionless against the morning light while everything else was in chaos. Absolutely insane story, right? But there were all these witnesses, unable to make any sense of what the hell they were seeing. There were tons of illustrations at the time too, depicting the eyewitness accounts, and they're nuts to look at. And there are theories as to what people saw, possibly a mirage. Some have said it was flocks of birds, but I don't know, doesn't sound likely. So what happened? Were people watching alien ships battle in the sky? Who the hell knows? But I, for one, would love to go back in time and see this for myself. So back in 1972, a group in Toronto wanted to do an experiment surrounding ghosts. But they weren't just testing whether ghosts were real. They wanted to see if ghosts aren't spirits of the dead, but something we create with our own minds. Dr. A.R.G. Owen and his team invented a ghost from scratch. They named him Philip Aylesford and created a whole backstory for him. Basically, they invented a character. They made him a nobleman from the 1600s who had a tragic romance that led to a lonely death. A pretty standard ghost story, except this wasn't based on any real historical event. They drew his portrait and described his old English estate, talking about him like he was a real person that they knew. Their first meetings were pretty normal. They just sit around talking about Philip's fake life. But once they started holding seances, the atmosphere started to change. Their table started trembling. Then came the knocks, soft at first, then sharp and clear. They'd ask Philip questions, and the knocks would answer, one for yes, two for no. And week after week, things escalated. The table would slide across the floor by itself. The lights would flicker. People People felt cold drafts against their skin, even when all the windows were shut. And some swore they heard faint laughter or whispers that didn't belong to anyone there. When they finally did a live seance in front of 50 witnesses, people in the audience felt a presence, heard things moving around, but nothing showed up on the recording equipment. Philip only seemed to exist when people believed he did. They had set out to prove that hauntings were purely psychological, but they ended up creating something that felt genuinely real to everyone in that room. So if belief alone could move furniture and drop the temperature, then where does imagination end and reality begin? Joe LaBelle was a fur trapper who knew the routes around Lake Anjikuni in Canada's Northwest Territories pretty well. In November 1930, he showed up at a small Inuit village he'd visited before. About 25 people lived there. What he was expecting to see was smoke from fires, people preparing for winter, and kids running around, but what he found was completely quiet. Food was still hanging on drying racks. Clothes were folded inside tents. Tools were sitting right where someone had been using them. Then LaBelle found the dogs, all dead, still tied up, frozen solid. Then he reached the burial ground, and every grave had been dug up. They were now all empty. But there were no tracks leading out of the village. LaBelle rushed to alert the Mounties, who investigated but couldn't come up with a solid explanation. And when newspapers ran the story in 1931, the police suddenly denied the whole thing ever happened. After that, there were all kinds of theories. Forced relocation by the government, mass kidnapping. People also talked about glowing lights over the lake around that time. So what happened? Is the story a hoax? Did something happen that the authorities wanted buried? Or did something genuinely unexplainable take place? We may never know. It was mid-morning break at Ariel School in Ruwa, Zimbabwe, September 16th, 1994. About 60 kids between 6 and 12 years old were outside playing while their teachers were inside having a meeting. Suddenly, the children started seeing silver objects drop from the sky, landing in the brush just past the playground fence. And then figures stepped out. Short beings dressed in black with big bulbous eyes. A bunch of them panicked and ran back toward the school, but some stayed and watched, and this is where it gets really bizarre. The children said these beings communicated with them telepathically, not speaking out loud, but putting thoughts directly into their heads. The message was about Earth, warnings about pollution, technology, humans destroying the planet. When they told their teachers what had happened, they obviously didn't believe them. But that night, the kids all went back to their parents. And by the next day, everyone in the area was talking about it. The story hit the radio, and soon UFO researcher Cynthia Hind showed up, followed by a BBC reporter, Tim Leach, and Harvard psychiatrist John Mack. He interviewed the students separately, and their drawings all matched up, and the descriptions were almost identical. And decades later, many of those witnesses, now adults with normal lives and careers, still insist that they saw something that day. The summer of 1980 brought a big marching band competition to Hollinwell Showground in Nottinghamshire, England. Hundreds of young performers had traveled from all over the East Midlands, some for hours, all excited to compete. The show started around 9 in the morning. By 10:30 though, people started collapsing. At first it was just a few students here and there, and then dozens, and then what looked like hundreds. One witness said they were, quote, falling down like 9 pins. Some turned pale and couldn't stop shaking. Many were vomiting and dizzy, saying their limbs felt like they had no bones in them. A few complained their eyes and throats were burning. Some adults in the crowd were affected too. At least 259 people ended up being rushed to the hospital. Nobody could figure out what had caused this. They tested everything: food, water, checked for radiation or pesticide spraying in the nearby fields. Eventually, the leading theory was that it was caused by a chemical called tridomorph, a pesticide that later got banned for being hazardous, but they can't say for sure if that's what it was. And there's this detail that still bothers people to this day. Some witnesses swore that even the horses near the showground collapsed. Whatever happened at Hollinwell is still considered one of Britain's most disturbing mass fainting events. The Sutton family farmhouse in rural Kentucky became the setting for one of the strangest nights in the history of UFO cases. It was August 21st, 1955. 8 adults and 3 young ones were staying at the house when Billy Ray Taylor went outside to get water from the well. And that's when he spotted a flying saucer-looking thing streak across the sky and land about a half mile away. He ran back inside to tell everyone, but they just laughed it off. And then when the family dog started losing its mind, barking and snarling at something outside, Elmer Sutton and Billy Ray grabbed their firearms. They went to check it out and saw movement in the trees. What came out wasn't an animal or an intruder though, at least not the human kind. There were a bunch of small figures, maybe 2 or 3 feet tall, with these grotesquely thin limbs, huge heads, glowing yellow eyes, and bat-like ears. Lucky fired at one from close range. He heard a metallic ping sound as it fell backward, then watched it pop right back up and disappear into the shadows. For 4 hours straight, these creatures kept showing up, peering through their windows and scratching at the doors. One dropped down on Taylor from the roof when he stepped outside to fire at them again. The family held them off until the sun came up, then piled into their car and drove straight to the Hopkinsville police station. When investigators arrived at the farm, they found bullet holes, broken windows, and this strange glowing patch of soil where the family said the creatures had been standing. And that was the last anyone in town heard from the Sutton family. Steve McCalloch was a 50-year-old mechanic from Winnipeg who liked exploring the wilderness around Falcon Lake, Manitoba. May 20th, 1967 started as a normal day for him until he encountered something that left him with burns and a story that would go down in history as one of Canada's most infamous UFO reports. He flagged down a passing constable, saying he'd been burned by one of 2 glowing rotating objects that he'd seen. Spaceships, he called them. When officers checked him out, his shirt and hat were scorched. That evening he went for medical treatment. He had first-degree burns, described as irregular, blotchy marks about the size of silver dollars. Days later, McCalloch went public with the story, showed photos of the burns, provided detailed drawings of the disc-shaped craft. According to him, one of the ships landed, a door opened, and bright violet light poured out. He heard hissing air and voices that sounded human. He tried communicating in multiple languages, English, Russian, German, but got no response. When the ship took off, it left a circular indentation in the ground. After that, McCalloch started experiencing headaches, vomiting, and noticed the strange smell he couldn't identify. The RCMP got involved, so did the Canadian Air Force and later US researchers. A month later, McCalloch went back to the site with a partner, collected soil samples, and the soil did show to be slightly radioactive. The ground also had this semicircle where moss had been completely eviscerated. The townsfolk in Devon, England woke up one morning in February of 1855 to something nobody could make sense of. Heavy snow had fallen overnight, and there were tracks everywhere. Only seems natural, but these were very odd tracks. They were hoof-like prints, 4 inches long, 3 inches wide, in a single straight line. They crossed fields, went over rivers, they were on people's rooftops. Some of the prints went straight up and over narrow walls. People kept reporting them over the next few days. They weren't just in one neighborhood. They showed up miles apart. Whatever made them could either move impossibly fast or was appearing in multiple places at once. People were genuinely scared. Newspapers tried calling them mysterious animal tracks, but everyone else was whispering about the devil, especially when preachers brought up the footprints during sermons. In the 170 years since, people have tried explaining it away. Maybe it was some sort of hopping animal, an elaborate prank. We can't say for sure. All we know is that someone or something was out there in that snow that night. Back in October of 2010, something strange happened near the Michigan-Wisconsin border. Folks in Menominee felt the ground shake, and a huge crack suddenly opened up on a woman named Eileen Hyder's property. She said, "I was sitting watching television on my recliner and I started moving. It was weird, maybe only lasted 15 seconds. The crack was massive though, 360 feet long, with a ridge about 6 feet high stretching the length of a football field. People, of course, assumed that an earthquake had happened, but Michigan Technological University researchers ruled that out. Wayne Pennington, the dean of Michigan Tech's College of Engineering, was completely shocked by what he saw and said nothing even registered on a seismograph. After studying the site, the team concluded that what's called a pop-up had occurred. This basically is when underground pressure on the limestone beneath the area suddenly releases, pushing the ground up and forming a massive crack like this. Usually it's caused by the removal of a glacier, but the glacier left here 11,000 years ago, so why did it wait until 2010 to happen? Pennington said. This type of pop-up is extremely rare. The pressure in that area had likely been building up for thousands of years, and whatever triggered it finally gave way in 2010.